Hello friends. Now in the second session I am going to discuss custom, folkways, caste system and ashram vyavastha. These all are very important to understand our society or any other society excepting the ashram system. Now customs are generally referred to as traditional practices that are followed by the people of a section of society or by the society at large and make up the foundation structure of a society. Indian society has diverse customs and traditions, and they usually bring out the distinctiveness of Indian people. These customs are an outcome of the cultural metrics which are followed by the people. Custom is an integral part of culture or subculture. K.M. Panikar defines culture as the complex of ideas, conceptions, developed qualities and organized relationships and courtesies that exist generally in a society. He described it as a community of thought, a similarity of conduct and behavior, a common general approach to fundamental problems which arrives from shared traditions and ideals. Culture is more general, whereas custom is specific to a society or community. According to McIver and Page, the socially accredited ways of acting are the customs of society. According to Kingsley Davis, custom refers primarily to practices that have often been repeated by multitude of generation practices that tend to be followed simply because that they have been followed in the past. Now, you must have understood what customs are. Customs are the general patterns of our behavior which are transferred from one generation to the other. Now, nature of customs. Basic nature of custom is that custom is a social phenomenon. Why it is a social phenomenon? Because customs are created when there is society. It is an outcome of interaction of people. Customs are the oft repeated practices of the people. They represent the routine acts of daily life of the people. Customs are created by the groups, associations, communities and institutions. They are considered to be conducive for the integration of society. As you must have heard that people say that it is customary in a society to do this or to do that. Then customs are followed unconsciously. As McIver and Page have pointed out, we conform to the customs of our society in a sense unconsciously, that not consciously but still unconsciously also we practice or we follow certain customs because it becomes integral part of our personality. During the socialization process, during the training process, we learn certain customs. This is because they are a strongly embedded part of our group life. We are trained from our infancy to behave in a customary way. Children learn their customs by imitation or by direct instruction during the course of their socialization. Now, customs are varied in nature. There are different types of customs right from the birth of an individual till his death or till her death. His whole lifespan is attached with number of customs. Every event or every period of his life or her life is associated with number of customs. And customs are universal in nature, but they differ from community to community and from society to society. Each society has its own set of customs. A particular society has a different type of custom and the other society has different type of customs, but there is no society which does not has its customs. For example, the customary dressing act on occasions such as marriage and funeral ceremonies differ from group to group. In certain communities, people wear white clothes, whereas in other communities, people wear black clothes while they are mourning the death of a person. Then the origin of custom is obscure. It is difficult to ascertain the exact way in which customs emerge. As McDougall writes, the ends and purposes of many customs are lost in the midst of antiquity. Customs are relatively durable because they are practices of the community life, they are the practices of the group life. So, they stay for quite a long period. And there is a change also in customs. It is not necessary that a particular custom remain forever in a particular society or in a group of society. Customs evolve gradually and hence they are obeyed mostly in a spontaneous manner. When once the customs are established, they gain grounds to become firm. They are implicitly obeyed with least resistance by the majority of the people. People do not generally object to follow a particular custom. Some might in exceptional cases, but normally not. Now, social importance of customs. Customs regulate our social life. Customs act as the effective means of control. So, individuals can hardly escape their grip. They are the self-accepted rules of social life. They bind people together, assimilate their actions to be the accepted standards and control their purely egoistic impulses. They are found among the pre-literate as well as among the literate people. They are found among the primitive societies as well as among the most industrial or most advanced or most postmodern societies as well. Now, customs constitute the treasury of our social heritage. Customs preserve our culture and transmit it to the succeeding generations. They have added stability and certainty to our social life. They bring people together and develop social relationships among them. They provide for a feeling of security in human society. People normally abide by these and their violation is considered as a sin. Customs are basic to a collective life. This is one of the most important feature of customs because these are created by the society, these are created by the associations, these are created by the groups. So, they represent a collective life of a particular group or of a society. Now, customs are found in all the communities of the world. They are more influential and dominant in the primitive society than in the modern society because modern society is advanced society. So, modern society is based more on logic and rational as compared to the primitive society. As Malinowski writes in the context of the study of Probrient Islander that a strict adherence to customs is the main rule of conduct among our natives because Malinowski conducted his field work in Probrient Islanders. There he found that that society or Probrient Islanders were more bound by the customs. Now, next feature is customs support law because there is evolution of law. So, law have evolved from the customs. Customs when practiced for a longer period, then it becomes traditions. Now, customs also provide the solid foundation for the formulation and establishment of law. Customs become laws when the state enforces them as rules binding on citizens. Laws divorced from customs is bound to become artificial because custom have social sanction and law again has social sanction. So, whatever is sanctioned by the society becomes the law of the land. This happened in USA in the case of prohibition. Customs consolidate law and facilitate its practice. Customs are more complex and pertain to all aspects of human life. For example, there are customs of meeting and greeting in all societies. In Indian society, we join our hands when we meet someone, whereas in Western society, we shake our hands when we meet someone. Now, second topic is folklore. What is folklore? Like folk means people, lore means stories. Like custom, folklore is also part of culture. It includes stories, music, dance, legends, oral history, proverbs, jokes, popular beliefs, customs and so forth within a particular population comprising the traditions including oral traditions of that culture, subculture of group. It is also the set of practices through which those expressive genres are shared. The academic and usually ethnographic study of folklore is sometimes called folkloristic. The word folklore was first used by the English antiquarian William Thomas, in a letter published by the London journal Athenaeum in 1846. In common usage, there is a continuum between folklore and mythology. Smith-Thomson made a major attempt to index the motifs of both folklore and mythology, providing an outline into which new motifs can be placed and scholars can keep track of older motifs. Folkways, mores and customs represent different kinds of social norms. Social norms refer to group shared standards of behavior. What do you mean by shared standard of behavior? That means in what pattern, in what specific pattern one has to behave in a particular situation. There are standards of behaving in a classroom, there are standards of behaving in front of an elder person, elderly people, there are standards of behaving with the colleagues, with the peer groups. So, in all aspects of life, you have set patterns of behavior which is expected from an individual, that in what way you have to behave, you are supposed to behave. If you violate that pattern, that means you are violating the norms of the society, you are violating the standards of society. A social norm is a pattern setting limits on individual behavior. As I have told you that social norm is a pattern setting limits on individual behavior. That means you have certain restrictions, there are certain restrictions imposed upon you when you are in a interacting situation or when you are in a social situation. You cannot behave according to your free will. There are certain constraints upon your behavior. Then norms are the blueprints of behavior. They are the rules for social living or for social being. They determine, guide, control and also predict human behavior. Folklore, just like folkways, represent a means of social control because they control your behavior. As I have told you that you are not free to behave in any manner. There are certain restrictions, there are certain limits imposed upon your behavior when you are interacting in a particular situation. Now, genres of folklore. There are several genres of folklore. First is material culture. It includes folk art, vernacular architecture, textiles, modified mass-produced objects. Then music. Folklore originates from music as well. Then it includes traditional, folk and world music. Then narrative. Narrative means when you are telling something. So, legends, urban legends, fairy tales, folk tales, personal experience, narratives, etc. Then the verbal art. What is verbal art? When you communicate verbally with someone. Then it includes jokes, proverbs and word games. Then belief and religion, of course. Folk religion, it includes folk religion, ritual and mythology. Then there are foodways also, traditional cooking and customs, relationship between food and culture. These are all genres of folklore. Then folklore is again treated as an academic discipline. What do you mean by that? Academic discipline? It means how academicians study folklore. So, folklorists focus on the study of human creativity within a specific cultural and social context, including how such expressions, that is stories, music, material culture and festivals are linked to political, religious, ethnic, regional and other forms of group identity. The elusive material of folklore can best be defined through the formal genres into which they fall. Four broad sectors of folklore studies are given, like oral literature, material culture, social customs and festivals and performing folk art. Now, we will discuss what is oral literature, what do we mean by oral literature. Oral, you know, verbal. This is that is which is uttered by word of mouth. Then oral literature, also called as verbal art or expressive literature, are spoken, sung and voice forms of traditional utterances. Oral narrative is one big subdivision of this group, which in turn has its own manifold distinctions. For example, myth, fairy tale, romantic tale or novella, religious tale, folklore, legend, animal tale, anecdote, joke, etc. Another major subdivision of oral literature is oral poetry or folk poetry, which has its own family of related forms, that is folk epics, ballads, folk songs, lullabies, work songs, Devichar songs, zikirs with reference to the northeast of India, and songs associated with rituals and rites, that is sanskars of birth, marriage, death, etc. Commonly found in almost all part of India, because India is a land of multifarious culture, various regions. People of different parts speak different language, they eat different type of food, they dress up in a different style, but they all have folk culture of their own, they all have folklore of their own. Also included in this category is the rich oral poetry connected with festive occasions, feasts and ceremonies. Proverbs embodying wisdom in pithy phrases and riddles with enigmatic question paired with a deceptive answer still function in folk or tribal societies as important devices for imparting knowledge about cultural semantics, logical and behavioral patterns among the younger members. The folk speech embraces the local and regional turns of phrases that deviate from the standard language, which are sometimes taboo words, taboo means prohibition, or expressions from passive vocabulary. Characteristics at the level of grammar, idiom and even phonetics and nonsense sentence of such slang is difficult to pronounce because of its string of assonances. In this category, minor forms, namely beliefs or superstitions, chants, prayers, laments and cries can also be enumerated. Folklore is describable and transmissible entity. It can be described in words and it can be transmitted from one generation to other, from one group to other. Folklore can contain religious or mythic elements. It equally concerns itself sometimes with the mundane traditions of everyday life. Folklore frequently ties the practical and the esoteric into one narrative package. It has often been conflated with mythology and vice versa, because it has been assumed that any figurative story that does not pertain to the dominant belief of the time is not the same status as those of the dominant belief. Thus, Roman religion is called a myth by Christians. In that way, both myth and folklore have become catch-all terms for all figurative narratives which do not correspond with the dominant belief structure, because one group can call folklore of other as a myth, the other can call a myth the folklore of other culture. Folklore is a general term for different variation of traditional narrative. The telling of stories appears to be a cultural universal, because in all societies you will find that the grandparents or the parents, they tell stories to their children. When the child is young, when the child come to understand the things, then they narrate the stories, different types of stories. So these are all folk tales. Even the forms, folk tales are certainly similar from culture to culture, and comparative studies of themes and narrative ways have been successful in showing those relationships. Also, it is considered to be oral tale to be told for everybody. On the other hand, folklore can be used to accurately describe a figurative narrative which has so sacred or religious content. In the Jungian view, which is one method of analysis, it may need to pertain to unconscious psychological pattern, estimates or archetype of mind. This may or may not have components of the fantastic, such as magic, ethereal beings or the personification of inanimate objects. These folk tales may or may not average from a religious tradition, but nevertheless speak to deep psychological issues. The familiar folk tale Hansel and Gretel is an example of this. The manifest purpose of the folk tale may primarily be one of mundane instruction regarding forest safety, or secondary a cautionary tale about the dangers of famine to large families, but its latent meaning may evoke a strong emotional response due to widely understood themes and motives such as the terrible mother, death and atonement with the father. Now, material culture. In this spectrum of folklore, material culture or folk life responds to techniques, skills, recipes and formulas transmitted across the generations, and it is subject to the same forces of tradition and individual variations as verbal art, which is visual rather than oral. In this category can be placed folk architecture, arts and crafts, designs and decorations of the building and utensils, and performance of home industries according to traditional styles and methods. Decorative paintings embellishing the walls and entrances of rural tribal homes, having both ritualistic and aesthetic significance, is a pan-Asian phenomenon. When you go to a community or to a village or to even to some urban, if you go down to south, you will find there are some paintings, there are some motifs on the wall of the entrance of the home. Although the motif of such paintings of one region or culture zone may vary from that of another, their structural unity remains the same. Some people they put Om, symbol of Om, on the door of entrance door of their home. Some people they put feng shui items on the door of their entrance of their home. So, for instance, the snake and sparrow motifs are predominant in south and east coast, and animal, tree and flower motifs are common in northern tribes. Social customs and festivals. Here the emphasis is on group interaction rather than on individual skills and performance. To the verbal and tangible elements are added group behavioral traits. Of particular importance are the rites de passage such as birth, initiation, marriage, death and similar paraphernalia. Ritual and customs associated with festival in a country are sometimes related to agricultural activity following a calendrical cycle. For example, during the harvest season, Holi is celebrated. So, these along with customs associated with religious practices and the concept of Indian worldview form an important segment of folk life, and they partly function to provide psychic reassurance against external dangers of natural calamities. The religious aspect is multidimensional, encompassing the most complex caste hierarchy, which has a network of interrelations with the religious hierarchy. Besides pan-Indian mode of worshipping, Hindu pantheon, there are very ancient and indigenous modes of worship and performance of rites prevalent in tribal belts to placate gods and demons, quite distinguishable from other parts of the country. Now comes the performing art, folk art. This sector of folklore studies concerns primarily with the traditional music, drama and dance passed on the succeeding generations by ear and performed by memory rather than by writer and printed musical score and relevant literature, which usually overcome the generic barriers. The folk music is functional in the sense that it is not entertainment or of particular aesthetic interest, but it is an accompaniment to other. There can be both moral and psychological scope to the work as well as entertainment value, depending upon the nature of the teller, the style of the telling, the ages of the audience members and the overall context of the performance. Folklorists generally resist universal interpretations of narratives and wherever possible analyze oral versions of telling in specific contexts rather than print sources, which often show the work or bias of the writer or editor. Folk literature is but a part of folklore. Customs and beliefs, ritualistic behavior, dances, folk music and other non-literary manifestations form part of the larger study of ethnology. However, these distinctions are of concern to the folklorist. The study of folklore materials was at the time being carried on under labels such as popular antiquities or popular literature. Therefore, he suggested a good section compound folklore, the lore of the people. Besides the work of brothers Grimm, particularly German philologist Jacob Grimm was published the first volume of the Kinder und Märchen Moss Marchand. Grimm's Fairy, the scholarly scientific study on folklore, was initiated. The tales were the detritus of the old myths. Of course, all the American folklore minded anthropologists experienced difficulty in employing the term folklore with a culture almost wholly oral and traditional, and they resorted to various substitutes. William Bacon, a student of Herskovits, suggested the term verbal art to denote the oral aesthetic tradition of tale, proverb, song and riddle in the culture, tearing out the supernatural belief system and the practices. He clarified the functional use of folklore in non-literate societies. In order to trace all growth of folkloristic studies, we must focus on the scholarly work done in Asia, particularly in India, before the Grimms. Fairy tale, namely Katha Sarita Sagar, Panchtantra and Jatakas. A German scholar, Theodor Banfei, even claimed in his introduction to Panchtantra that India, the seat of an ancient, highly developed civilization that had spread to Europe, was the home of the master tales subsequently found in the Grimm's collection. Along with language and mythology, these wonder tales had diffused from India to Europe in ancient and historic times along well-traversed trade routes. The famous historical geographical school known as Finnish school was highly inspired by this diffuseness theory. Some scholars in India applied the methodology of this formalistic discipline in their studies, while Banfei's theory gave support to mythological perspective. However, European scholars with strong colonial convictions, including famous Indologists, historians and anthropologists who believe in gradually converting India and bringing in within the Greek-Roman Semitic culture zone, discarded the diffusionist approach and advocated theories that were polygenetic in nature. Anthropologists of the School of Cambridge University converged on the central idea of myth ritual origin of folklore on the basis of comparative study of Sir James George Fraser, who has written the famous book, but I must say most famous book, The Golden Bough. In their view, mythic narrative accompanied and explained a sacrificial fertility ritual among the Heathens. In course of time, the myth became separated from the rite and floats independently in oral tradition to splinter into magic tales, popular ballads, nursery rhymes and other folklore genres. Partly as a result of the Romantic movement in literature and partly due to the interest in primitivism and the common folk, the recording of all sorts of songs and oral tales has been phenomenal since about 1800. Scholars have propounded many theories about the origin, development, spread and structure of folklore through the world in the last 150 years. Beside comparative mythology developed by Max Muller on his publication of translated version from the Sanskrit sacred books of the East, evolutionary theory of culture and devolutionary theory of folklore, which emerged in a hypothesis put forward by Theodor Banfei and several other schools also engaged themselves in the studies and interpretation of folklore. To name a few, first was mythological school, then the migrational Banfei's school, then third was anthropological school, fourth was historical geographical school, that is also known as Finnish school, and psychoanalytical school, structural school. It had two parts, syngrammatic, that is Props morphological school, and paradigmatic Levi-Straussian school. The next is Thomsonian concept of motive, that is classificatory analysis tale types, then functional school, then historical reconstructional theory, then ideological theory, then oral formulatic theory, then cross cultural theory, then folk cultural theory, mass cultural theory, contextual theory, hemispheric theory. We need not to go into details of all these theories. This is just for the reference of you people, that you should have some idea that how many schools and how many theories have been propounded to explain, to analyze folklore. The writers and lyricists have always used themes taken from oral legend and folk songs, and in turn have themselves affected the traditions. In the recent years, cinema has presented old folk tales to an enthralling public and radio and television. Inevitable, this oral literature has become less truly oral and mostly pseudo folk culture. Pseudo means false, has been presented to the public. Therefore, during the past few generations, folk festivals have flourished in both number and rich variety and have become almost worldwide. They have been like a stimulus or preservation of a disappearing phase of modern life and are likely to revive older dances, keeping them within the authentic local traditions. The inquiring minds of intellectuals in social sciences and humanities, particularly ethnologists, anthropologists, historians, etc., have adopted scientific approach to investigate this subject of a substantial worldwide body of scholarship. In India, we always talk of Margi and Desi Vedic and Lokik, that is classical and folk traditions, which is also as known as great and little traditions. Unilinear evolutions and few universals may not explain the variety produced by multicultural folk traditions. In this sense, the Indian equivalent of folklore, that is Lokyan, coined by Suniti Kumar Chatterjee, expresses the real scope of folklore as it signified a way of life. The area of folklore is therefore circumscribed by a pedagogical motive of adjusting the members of a social group to the needs of the group. Folklore thus ultimately becomes the means of expressions of a group's own attitude and cultural life. The civilization of a people being a movement from unconscious to conscious, it is obvious that their beliefs and customs would be didactic with an end to adjust man to his immediate surroundings for a leap forward to his future. Ultimately, the said idea would give us a glimpse of social formations, cultural evolution and the group's worldview. In the colonized nations, each folk tradition serves to reinforce the group identity of its members in a pluralistic culture. Syncretism, acculturation of the fusion of different traditions, is a process especially characteristic of New World folklore. The traditional lore physically attached to the original homeland seems to vanish fast. If any of it cease to exist within the memory of man, it is completely lost. However, its dying process is actually very slow. Tribal people scattered across different continents need their myths to safeguard their identity. Therefore, in the electronic age, according to Marshall McLuhan, the literate word is reverting to an oral community. So, I hope you must have understood what folklore is, and I just give you a question. You have to think about the folklorist, female folklorist from Rajasthan, who is a folklorist and who is a folk teller and who is very popular throughout the world. So, you just think over it and get the name of that lady. Now, we come to the caste system. You all know what is caste, and you all belong to one or the other caste, because our society's main feature is caste system. It was the founding stone of Indian social structure, and it is the unique feature of Indian society only. Then what is caste? Caste is known as jati in common parlance. Some people say that this is my jati. That means they refer to this is my caste. Caste as a system of social relations has been a central point in Hindu society for several centuries. A lot of conjectures, controversies and explanations have come about its origin, nature and role in Indian society. It has been claimed that it is an all-encompassing system, an ideology which would govern all other relations. Its whole notion is hierarchy based on the ideas of pollution and purity. A caste is an endogamous group. What is endogamous group? Endo means within, gama means marriage. Marriage within the same caste. Marriage within the same caste group. That is, its members marry within the same caste. A man is born in a caste and remains in that forever. A person cannot change his caste even by any virtue. Caste is decided by birth of a person in a particular family. Caste of the father will be the caste of the children. Member of a caste used to have a particular occupation on a hereditary basis. A given caste occupies a particular rank in the hierarchy of caste, hence some are superior to it, some are inferior. There are certain rules regarding eating, drinking and social interaction which are to be followed by all castes. Caste Panchayat used to regulate the behavior of its member by implementing these rules. Caste is a dynamic institution. It has changed a great deal in accordance with changes in the wider society. The origin of the caste system dates back to the age of the Rig Veda. There is a reference to the word Varn, that Varn means color. In the Rig Veda, Arya is referred to as fair and Dasa as dark. People of the two Varnas differ not only in their skin color but also in their worship and speech. Thus, the difference between both social and cultural, Brahmins, Rajnayas, that is Kshatriya, and Vaishya as constituted the Aryavarna succeeded, and the second were non-Aryans made up of Das Varna. The Purush Sukt, a part of the Rig Veda, states that the Brahmins, Rajnyas, Vaishyas and Shudras sprang up from the mouth, arms, thighs and feet of the Purush, that is God. Later on, these became classes. However, there is no reference to the classes becoming hereditary. Classes were merely functional. The priest and the warrior occupied positions above the Vaishya and the Shudra, but they were neither hereditary positions nor exclusive ones. There was interchange of duties, also interclass marriages prevailed. The ban on eating food cooked by Shudras did not exist. There was no trace of untouchability. The later Vedic civilization consists of Samhitas, Atharvaved, Yajurved and the Brahmins and Shudra. The notion of sacrifice gained prominence. The doctrine of karma, maya, transmigration, identity of the individual soul with the universal soul and mukti as main tenets of Hinduism find their first expression in the Upanishads. The power and privilege of the priestly caste, that is Brahmins, increased, but Kshatriyas challenged this from time to time. The system of nomenclature to address the members of these castes emerged. The idea of pollution by touch found expression. The caste system became inflexible with when birth became the basis of caste rank. Restriction of marriage and social relations were also imposed. The goddess of Gautama, Bodh Gaya, Apastamba have reference regarding hereditary and communality. The caste system, which is an integral part of the Indian system, has a long standing history of its own. To understand how the system has come to be, it is today one needs to have a deeper understanding of the origin, evolution and growth of caste system. Three main stages in the evolution of caste may be identified. Number one, caste in ancient age, that is the period up to 1100 AD, which is inclusive of Vedic age, post-Vedic age and Puranic age. And then the second period is caste in medieval age, that is period from 1100 AD to 1757 AD, which includes the Muslim rule in India. And the third period is caste in modern age, that is post 1757 AD till independence, or we can say till today. Changes in caste system in independent India. Changes in the traditional features of caste. The religious basis of caste has been attacked. Caste is no more believed to be divinely ordained. It is being given a more social and secular meaning than a religious interpretation. Second change was restriction on food habits have been relaxed. Distinction between pakka food and kacha food has almost vanished, because in previous time there was a strict restriction on taking up of kacha food and pakka food. What is a kacha food? Kacha food is roti, and pakka food is which is fried food, that is called pakka food. Food habits have become more a matter of personal choice than a caste rule. Still, commensal taboos are not completely ignored, especially in the rural areas. Interdining has not become the order of the day. And third change was caste is not very much associated with hereditary occupations. Now you see that Brahmin is doing job of a cobbler, or Brahmin is doing job or running a factory of shoe. Then occupations are becoming more and more caste free. Brahmins are found driving taxis, dealing with footwears, and running non-vegetarian hotels and bars, and so on. And even Shudras, the so-called Shudras or the untouchables, they are in the teaching profession, they are in the medical profession, they are in the engineering profession, or highly reputed clean occupations. So the ritual aspect and the beginning of the Jati system. The Varna Dharma or code governing the conduct of different Varna received a high degree of elaboration in the post-Vedic period. The three lower castes are ordered to live according to the teaching of the Brahmin, who declared their duties. The king is exhorted to regulate their conduct accordingly. Commenting on the slowly changing social phenomena, Lenoy observes that the different specialist tasks among the Brahmins themselves became associated with degrees of ritualistic purity and impurity. For example, the priest who actually killed the sacrificial beast was lower in ritual status than the presiding priest. So within the Brahmins also there was a hierarchy on the basis of work, occupation or jobs performed by a particular Brahmin. It was in the extension of this Vedic principle of graded ritual status of the entire range of social life that caste classification division into Jati originated. He further points out that there appears to be two interacting movements, the Brahmin gradation of purity and impurity, eventually resulting in Jati classification, and a second gradation, residual or evolving among groups excluded from the Brahminical rites. Then there were certain groups who were not allowed to perform Brahminical rites. What may have occurred is a defensive reaction on the part of the Aryan rules. Massively outnumbered of social divisions were incorporated into the emergent pure-impure opposition. The trend would have been given added impetus by the increasing occupational differentiation. While the determining principle remained the pure-impure opposition, and power was differentiated from status, changes in the means of production and association of occupation with purity and pollution demanded the extension of a social ranking which accorded with both criteria. Castes were therefore a device for coming to terms with the other in a holistic system, the Varna and the Jati. So there is a difference between Varna and Jati. Originally when the Aryan came, they created Varna. That Varna means selection of an occupation to select, and it also referred to color of the skin. The Vedic system theory of the Varna system is the textual reference of the Indian social organization in which subtle balance was maintained between the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra. Because this hierarchy or the system of stratification based on caste was created for society to run in an integrated and holistic manner. There was no intention, there was no bad intention to exploit a particular group or not to exploit the other group. The caste system is apparently linked with the Varna, but is so different from it. The two are often confused and are taken to mean the same, whereas they are not the same, they are different. The Jati system is an empirical order verifiable by direct observation of caste ranking and other familiar distinctions. The Jati system is not uniform, it varies from region to region. Whatever the nature of ranking, the consideration of pure and impure remains the sole common basis of the Jati system, because whether you go to South India or to go to Northeast, or you go to North India or you to go West India, you will find caste system. But basic concept is there is one group which is treated as untouchable and the other as the upper caste, or the pure. Concept of purity and pollution is attached with the caste system. Dumont, according to Lenoy, regards these two systems as homologous and to have interacted on each other. Now Jati and its transformation. Now we will see what transformations caste system has gone. The Dharma Shastras, the law books of Manu and Vishnu, throw considerable light on the contemporary social institution. The Manu Smriti, which is pre-Buddhist in composition, maintains a distinction between the Arya and the non-Arya called Das. This term was also used for Chandals, Sabpakas and others who were considered inferior to Shudras. According to Manu Smriti, as indicated in the Hindu civilization, there were mixed castes springing from adultery, marriage and ineligible women and violation of the duties of caste. That means the adultery means if a man or a woman of upper caste marries a lower caste person, then the offspring out of that will be Shudra. Or if intercaste marriage, if an offspring is produced after as a result of intercaste marriage, then the child will be Shudra according to the Smriti. Intermarriage between castes produced a crop of unclassified progeny who were all branded as Sudras and described by their occupations, Swakarmbhim, that means occupation by their own karam. There was a Catholic rule that he who was begotten by an Aryan of a non-Aryan female may become an Aryan by virtue. This relaxation was probably to accommodate the foreigners and the artisan classes whose hand was also pure. These new Sudras were given a higher status than the born Sudras and untouchables. Caste as social unit thus became to be recognized and came to be known by the appropriate marks of distinction. It is described to be the duty of the king to see that all castes observe their rules and regulations and to bring the erring members of the path to the path of duty. Before settling a dispute, a king is expected to inquire into the caste of the individual to the dispute and to administer justice in accordance with the caste regulations. According to Ghurye, Jati or caste has come to be a very important feature of Hindu social organization. Both the plaintiff and the defendant in a law suit has to register their Jati. No principle of equality or inequality was accepted before the law for all the castes, and there were differential norms for reward and punishment for the same deed on the basis of people belonging to higher caste or lower caste. Suppose a higher caste people commit the same crime, then he will be punished less severely, and if the lower caste people commit the same crime, then he will be punished more severely. So, with the emergence of the new group or caste of untouchables, there had come into existence rigid norms of pollution and purity. Now, caste in urban and rural society. In the urban society too, caste differentiation during this period became rigid. The orthodox avoided not only the new settlers but also the converts as well, for consideration of personal hygiene and pollution, as it indicated by the use of the word mlech for the new settlers. Within the structured society, the caste barrier too became rigid as a safety cover against the conversion to Islam. Successively, however, these laws was there was the change in the attitude and the word mlech went out of use. The expediency of social intercourse later did bring the people closer, and the belief in chut, that is untouchable, purity and pollution, got relaxed, but the caste rigidities did not. The hands of the power that was could not reach the village, except in so far as the collection of revenue was concerned. Conversions to Islam in the villages, except in those which were closer to the town, was not possible. The villages therefore in general retained their socio-economic structure. In most of the rural India, there existed and continues to exist a dominant caste. It had to have three characteristics. What is a dominant caste? Caste that has hold over the village. So, what are the features of a dominant caste? It should have maximum portion of ownership of the village land. Then the landowner should be of higher caste, or it can be of any other caste. Then they should be numerically strong. Their number in the village should be large as compared to the other caste. So, then if a caste fulfills all these characteristics, then the caste will be dominant in that particular village. It is not necessary that a particular caste which is dominant in a particular village is also dominant in other village. Now, in case if in a given area there existed more than one dominant caste, one of them had to give to another. One has to surrender its status to the other. This, according to M.N. Srinivas, happened occasionally even in pre-British India and has been an important aspect of rural social change in the 20th century. The authority in the village used to be divided in terms of status and role between Brahmins and the dominant caste. The Brahmin was the supreme arbitrator in matters religious and temporal. Disputes were settled by the internal disputes within a caste. Besides, as indicated by Lenoy, the internal affairs of each middle or low caste were governed by its own caste panchayat and by sabhas. Council covering the affairs of a caste within a readily accessible region also existed, though some were rarely convened. In many cases, particularly among middle and low caste, these still survive. Now we will come to new socio-economic forces and caste. What are the factors, what are the socio-economic factors which has changed the caste system? From the Upanishadic time to this day, the teachers such as Buddha, Kabir, Guru Nanak, Chaitanya, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Swami Dayanand Saraswati, Mahatma Gandhi and Swami Vivekanand all spoke against the caste system. The caste system is opposed to the religion of Vedanta, remarked Swami Vivekanand. Lala Lajpat Rai held that the Arya Samaj repudiates caste by birth. There has been thus a continuous protest down the ages against it. The changed conditions have now made its continuous protest down the ages against it. The changed conditions have now made its continuity difficult. It is an ending phenomenon. Here we discuss some of the trends against the caste system. First we will see how English language, modern education and caste prejudices have changed the caste system. The role of Purohit, his ritual sanction authority, the traditionalism and the immobility of individuals and of the groups had generally sustained the caste prejudices. Introduction of the new language, English language, as the language of administration made the first serious breach in the assumed impregnability of the caste system. It weakened the position of the Purohit, his ritual sanction authority, traditionalism and encouraged social mobility, since to learn the English language on the one hand to go to the town or the city, one needed no initiation in the orthodox manner or any other help from Purohit Brahmin. Obviously, it caused power disequilibrium in the social group, maybe even in the village. The English learning progressed under the government patronage. It processed independent of influence of Brahmin. Those who got the benefit of this education secured the position of prestige available to them in the village in the form of jobs in the administration. Some of them worked in the towns and earned a good salary. This added significance, prestige and power to the caste group from which such individuals came. The modern education introduced by the British was basically secular and liberal. It was available to anyone who could pay for it, irrespective of one's caste or community position. It popularized the idea of freedom of association, equality before law, equal right of all citizens or the state and equal freedom to follow any vocation. This, on the one hand, led a selection of educated class of Hindu society like Ram Mohan Roy, Devendranath Tagore, Keshav Chandra Sen and others to raise a standard of revolt against caste, and on the other gave rise to the depressed classes movement under the leadership of Dr. Ambedkar and the self-respect movement in South India. Now, caste destabilizing factors. Our society represents a panoramic view of the play of history. We have amongst us the primitive tribes and progressive communities, the custom and practices of unknown antiquity and also a long tradition of resentment against them. There is the presence of the tribal instinct to preserve the old and the natural desire to adopt and own the new. We are a pluralistic society with much pluralism at every level of our social order. We are a structural society with many not within the social structure, and with the structured society there are insular caste-minded groups who do not seem to take into account the changes that influences the community. We are also a society of contradictions. There are primitive practices which everybody talks of eradicating, yet all along these are accommodated. There is the recognized uneasiness against the caste at all levels, and yet in all our social thinking. It has not lost its dominance. We are instinctively and constitutionally a proclaimed secular society. Yet there is a commission to look after the interest of the religious minorities. We are a society, yet one of the least integrated. Pandit Nehru well compared society to palimpsest, an ancient manuscript written upon over and over again without the preceding traces having been removed. Much of the past hinders our progress. Some undoubtedly we cannot give up, but indiscriminate loyalty to anything cannot be helpful. We are instinctively and constitutionally a proclaimed secular society, yet there is a commission to look after the interest of the religious minorities. One ashram dharma, purusharth and the system of sanskar imparted individuals and social discipline, inculcated tradition and culture, and helped in acculturation. The one system, in terms of the twice born concept, insisted on a certain cultural standard which others in the structured societies were expected to follow. It did not visualize that closed society as we see it now. The internalization of norms and values was effected on the one hand by ashram system and on the other by performance of the sanskar. The role of Brahmin Purohit in this way singularly was significant. On the one hand, he opened up the interior of the other, he stimulated the culturalization of the detribalized. The jati system, as indicated before, developed in response to changing social conditions. They gave flexibility to the social order and brought all people within its fold. They gave to the country the basic cultural unity that crept over with the passage of time on the men living in the hills or on the mountains' height, on the plains or in the fastness of jungles. This cultural cohesiveness, the Indianness, withstood the dynamic rivalry, foreign invasion and proselytism by the fanatics. No doubt, when looking from this distance of time, their holistic approach invites comment, yet every age has its values and norms, its means and ends, its survival, its justification. It made clash of races and of cultures an impossibility. The manner they used the concepts of swadharma, that is personal moral conduct, and varn dharma to bring about the integration in the interest of Sanatan dharma is simply inspiring. It not only integrated the pupils at various levels of culture, but also set out the pathways for others to join. This way, the variation in little traditions got affiliated and attached to the great tradition. One helped the other to grow stronger and stronger. By the beginning of the 8th century AD, the society was again the crucible. The political India had broken up and the society was in disruption. Brahmin had lost the intellectual leadership, priestism had become dominant, and the caste rigidities had compartmentalized the society and killed the community sense. The Turks, Afghans and Mughals in succession gained political ascendancy while retaining their strong sense of belongingness to the Islamic West. They followed the policy of Darul Islam, imposed Sharia on the people, effected conversions to Islam, which in consequence developed situation extremely unusual, like of which the society had never confronted before. Caste system failed for the first time to bring these people within the social fold. The society got divided as we have indicated above. The settlers thus remained outside the structured society. Indian Muslims, bewildered and confused, successively worked out new adjustment. When all is said, truth in the Indian Islam says there seemed to be little doubt that Hinduism was wrought a far greater change in Islam than Islam has wrought in Hinduism. It got in more ways than localized as it has got elsewhere. Indian Islam assumed a form much different from the Islam beyond the frontiers of a country. That of course, though natural, is not always appreciated and emphasized. The discouraging factor in bringing about the sociological homogeneity was not religion, as it is commonly believed, as at higher level there is broad agreement between Hinduism and Islam. The Sufi persuasions, especially of the Chisti order and the teachings of the Bhaktis such as Chaitanya, Kabir and Nanak made a deep impact on the common people. Now, social mobility. Social mobility with reference to one mobility. One was open, caste was closed. Closed means that one cannot change the caste. If a person is born in a particular caste, then till his death he or she will remain in the same caste. Whereas one is open, one can change the one. One is the selection of the occupation also. So, once ashram dharma was the social structure based on this understanding, the social mobility is a social necessity. This pluralistic arrangement was expected to facilitate the social mobility of individual or of a group on the one basis, which meant choosing one's vocation according to one's qualification. It was open also to people outside the structured system who had to brought within the social order. There was thus a twofold social mobility, the internal and external, from lower to the higher varna and from non-varna order to the one order. It was obviously expected to be a continuous process. The arranged sublime hierarchy or varna was well conditioned. It was initiated with the promise of equal status for all. While all may be equal, the less equal had the opportunity to try for more equality. While the Brahmins within the hierarchy were recognized as the dharma knowing, those who studied and teach and the sacred lore are the human gods, were yet challenged from time to time. There were declarations to the effect that the Kshatriya were no superior and that the priest was only a follower of the king. Jainism and Buddhism may be religious revolts against the Brahminical ritualism, yet these were also the social revolts. Both of these movements were led by men from Kshatriya Varna. They had the support of the Vaishyas, the trader. Now, detribalization. The process of detribalization was coextensive with the development of the structural society. It gained momentum during the Magadha period and Mauryan period. It may have been more at some time that an all India movement. The process began by merely insisting on personal moral conduct, the Swadharma on the social ethical system, the ethical system of the Varna Dharma, and on the submission to the eternal and the universal, the Sanatan Dharma. The Brahminical insistence was on structure in the interest of totality and not on the acceptance of a particular ritualism. The purpose was not to convert but to assimilate. In the process, therefore, several tribal practices and rituals came to be part of religious order by holistic Brahmin section at every stage. Now, we will come to ashram vyavastha. Ashram vyavastha was a system in which an individual's whole life span was divided into 4 sections, into 4 stages, which were meant for integration of the society, for the solidarity of the society, and this represented traditional Hindu social organization. So, traditional Hindu social organization is based on Varna ashram dharma and the Purusharth. The Indological approach to the Indian society directly brings us to analyze and to understand the Varna ashram dharma and the Purusharth system, which is the foundation of our social order. It deals with individuals and society in all its comprehensiveness. Compartmental approach to matters social, temporal and spiritual was not favored for their very interconnectedness. One is a functional class and no class existed by itself, but one class could exploit another, and this possibly the one system completely eliminated. It also eliminated the possibility of the class struggle, that an individual as the constituent of social whole must contribute his best to its recognized and is assured by the ashram. But his role as the constituent of the whole is not the end of his doings. He is not just to be sacrificed for the social order. He must have also his inner fulfillment, the way to its own by Purusharth. The Purush Sukta hymn of Rig Veda, referring to the origin of the Chaturvarna, compares the society with giant organism having the Brahmin, the Kshatriya, the Vaishya and the Shudra as its head, arms, trunk and feet respectively, each one being functional like each organ, and all make together the society as the organs make the organism. All like the organs perform the co-equal functions. It is expressly stated in the text, thus no part of the whole may claim exclusive importance and superiority over the others. Suppose in a human body, your hands are equally important, your eyes are equally important, your nose is equally important, your legs are equally important, your feet are equally important. So, you cannot say that my feet are less important as compared to my brain, because if there are no feet, you cannot walk, you cannot do any work. So, all like the organs perform the co-equal functions. It is expressly stated in the text that no part of the whole may claim exclusive importance and superiority over the others. Collaboration and exchange of services are the essence of this organism theory. The various organs of the projected Purush body image are related in structural consistency. The one system is thus the specification of the function and rewards according to the qualitative character of the classes. The interrelation of the Dvijas. Dvijas means twice born. First birth is the natural birth which every human being takes or every living being takes, and the second birth is which is performed through the sanskar, through a ritualistic performance, that is the Upnayan sanskar. A sacred thread is worn by the upper caste people and there is ritual attached with this, then this is called the second birth of the individual. So, all the upper castes like the Brahmin, Kshatriya and Vaishya, they are treated as the Dvijas because they perform the Upnayan sanskar, and the Shudras, they do not perform the Upnayan sanskar, they do not wear, they were not allowed to wear a sacred thread. So, they were sacred thread. So, they were called the once born, and the upper caste of the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, they were called the Dvija or the twice born. So, Brahman is spiritually supreme but is materially dependent. Kshatriya is materially the master but is spiritually dependent upon Brahmin. This stratification has created an interdependent relationship. The monopolization of power in any form has been eliminated. The sociological functions were to be performed in cooperation. One system is a successful effort in establishing the social equilibrium. Now, the whole life was divided, as I have already told you, that the lifespan of a Hindu was divided into 4 sections. So, these were called the ashrams. So, the ashram system is a later development. It concerns the 4 stages of life: the brahmacharya, the grihasth, the vanprasth and the sannyas, one following the other in succession. Literally, ashram means making an effort. It implies therefore that for the fulfillment of one's life, one has to make an effort at every stage to have the best of it. Success in the succeeding stages was held to be based on efforts made in the preceding section. For example, if you have fulfilled all the conditions of the brahmacharya ashram, then your next stage, that is the grihastha ashram, will be successful. If you have successfully completed the grihastha ashram, then your vanprastha ashram will be successful. If you have performed all the conditions or the requirement of the vanprastha ashram, then your sannyas ashram will be successful. So, on average, lifespan was taken to be 100 years and each ashram was assigned a period of 25 years. So, there were 4 lifespans, 25 years each. Now, the brahmacharya ashram, it is also known as the indriya sannyas, the period of self control, because in brahmacharya you have to observe celibacy. It begins with the upnayan, that is with the investiture of the sacred thread, as I have already told you, the yagnopavitra, initiating the pupil, the brahmachari, the acharya, the teacher, whispered in the ears of the the great Gayatri mantra. The brahmacharya, it is also known as the indriya sannyas. Now, second ashram is the grihastha ashram. It begins with the marriage of a novice and with his consequent family responsibilities. Then comes the vanprastha ashram. It is the stage of progressive retirement after children had got settled and needed to move needed no parental care and attention, one left everything to the care of his son and entered upon the Vanprastha stage. Then the sannyas ashram, according to Apastamba, sannyasi is one who, abandoning truth and falsehood, pleasure and pain, the Vedas, this word and the text seek not only to attain. The sannyasi is, according to S. Radhakrishnan, a super social man, a Privrajka, a wandering teacher who influences a spiritual standard, though he may live apart from society. This supreme ideal of life has been described by Kalidas as owing the whole world with disowning oneself. His mission is to teach his highest spiritual experience. Now the four Purusharth. Attached with the ashram vyavastha, there are four Purusharth, which I have already discussed in part in the previous session, that there is dharma, arth, kam and moksha. These are attached with the ashram system, which are essential for one to get the moksha or the nirman. Now ashram as a place and as a way of life. Ashram it refers to or it means a way of life of a Hindu person. Ancient Indian literature reveals two meanings of two terms ashram. The first is that of a residence where holy people live and perform religious austerities. When it refers to such a residence, the term is commonly translated as hermitage. This is by far its most common meaning. It is so used in Brahminical, Buddhist and Jain literary sources, as well as in what might be called non-religious texts, such as drama, poetry and fables. The second meaning of the term is that of a religious or holy way of life. The latter is, in all likelihood, a technical usage as it occurs exclusively in Brahminical literature and mainly within the context of the ashram system. Although there appears to be a scholarly consensus that ashram refers to a place or a mode of life associated with religious exertion, there is a minority opinion which takes ashram to mean a place of rest. Under this hypothesis, the prefix a would have to be constituted as a strong vowel grade vriddhi of the privative prefix a shrama. Moreover, we have to be taken in its first meaning, namely fatigue, which has no religious connotation. According to this hypothesis, therefore, ashram is derived from a shrama, lack of fatigue. The Ramayana appears to support this derivation when it calls the hermitage, that is ashram, of the Saptujanaha sages a place that destroys fatigue. In all likelihood, however, the poet is here only attempting to draw a picture of one aspect of a hermitage, the peace and quiet of its surrounding and inhabitants, by the use of what we can call it phonetic etymology, a frequent practice in Indian literature, often amounting to nothing more than a play on the phonetic similarity between words. So, ashram system as a social institution. What is a social institution? Institutions are the guidelines of our behavior in society. Then Aram stem was meant for regulating the lifespan of a person. Originally, the four ashrams were treated as four legitimate modes of life open to adult male. In the classical formulation, the system became prescriptive. Prescriptive is how you have to behave, how you have to live your life. It was associated with the performance of sacraments. It was desirable for an adult male to follow it. In the later Hinduism, the ashram system assumed the function of regulating the life of individual members of society, and in this way it became a social institution. So, children, we have covered in this session four topics like the custom, folklore, caste system and ashram vyavastha. So, after going through this session or after having heard this session, you may be better able to understand Indian society, particularly traditional Indian society, and how it has come to change. What changes have taken place in the ashram system, how many people are following this ashram system, how many people are performing all these acts or sacraments, and what changes are taking place in our society, or you can compare our society with other societies as well. Thank you very much.